Hello everyone, welcome back to Killer Film Reviews. Today I'll be reviewing the film Oppenheimer, a film that I must say was very striking and very well done. It has some notable cast members such as Cillian Murphy, who played Scarecrow in the original Christopher Nolan Batmans, Florence Pugh as Jean Tatcock, basically a Communist Party member, pretty much. Robert Downey Jr. as Louis Strauss, Emily Blunt as Kitty Oppenheimer, Rami Malek as David L.T. Hill, Jack Quaid as Richard Feynman, Matt Damon as General Leslie Grove, and a bunch of other notable cast members. Oh yes, David Dastmalchian. That guy, you may know him from TV or from some other stuff. And Josh Hartnett as Ernest Lawrence, Tom Conte as Albert Einstein, Devin Bostic as Seth Nettleborn, Josh Peck as Kenneth Blaine. So, this movie's not meant for kids, obviously. There's a topless scene in it, so it's pretty early on in the film for those curious, and obviously if you're not of the age of 17 or older, you gotta watch it with a parent. I'm not gonna tell you, hey, don't take your kids to see movies, but this is really not one to have kids go see, as they won't understand anything of it, and it's not really meant for kids. It's meant for adults, people who are mature enough to see the world and understand the message that this film by Christopher Nolan's trying to convey. And that message is that some weapons shouldn't be made. Honestly. That's the kind of the takeaway I got from it, was that some weapons shouldn't have been made. And it was definitely like a 9 out of 10 for me for this film. I just thought that the film was a little too long for what it was trying to convey. They could have shortened it down to 2 hours and 30 minutes, honestly. But I get why they wanted to go longer. To kind of show you like the before and after of World War II and the effects of the atomic bomb, kind of a deal. The film really hinges a lot on a person really understanding the risks of war and understanding, hey, this was a hard time, this is why we had to do this, and so forth. It's kind of what I got out of it anyway. Others may have different interpretations of the film, but for me, that was what I got out of it, was some weapons shouldn't be made. So honestly, that's just case in point, The atomic bomb was used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, causing the deaths of many people. Something that I'm afraid was not avoidable, because the Japanese at that time had a very strong culture and they would have defended their homeland at all costs. But I don't agree with us developing even more destructive weapons than the nuclear bomb. Understand why it was developed, because we thought that Nazi Germany was going to take over or whatever, and they were going to build it, if not us. That was literally what the next video is going to be about. It's an alternate history of World War II. It's The Man in the High Castle. It's literally going to be the next one. So decide how I'm going to do that, if I'm going to rewatch some stuff or not. But the risks and the pressure from the war was very real, and I'm not discounting that. You understand why Oppenheimer pushed for us to try to have an arms control treaty back in the day, because he realized that these weapons of mass destruction are weapons of mass destruction, and they're not to be taken lightly. That's why this war with Russia is really ill-advised at the moment. I know that we think it's between Ukraine and Russia, but it's a proxy war too, and this is why people are calling for peace with Russia, even myself, because I think that this whole war has gone on for long enough, and nobody's really gaining anything. If anything, people are losing their lives. Young men, young Ukrainian men, young Russian men losing their lives because their countries can't come to peace. And that's the crazy part about all this. That is why films like Oppenheimer are important, because they illustrate the importance of why these weapons shouldn't be used, because they cause a devastating amount of loss of life. We can't really debate the use of the atomic bombs on Japan because we weren't alive during that time, and we don't know kind of what they were dealing with at that time. We weren't there physically. We couldn't have changed the trajectory of events unless we were physically present there. But there'll be debates over the use of the atomic bomb. For me, I think they should have stopped after they dropped one on Hiroshima. That should have been it. But nope, they had to drop another one on Nagasaki. But even the use of one of these weapons is not a decision to take lightly, and I don't like that we live in a world where at a moment's notice people can be obliterated into ashes by the push of a button that launches an ICBM. And honestly, one of the things that's kind of fell to the wayside because of the Ukrainian war, the Russo-Ukrainian war, whatever you want to call it, is the advanced weapons development of North Korea. And how they're continuing to develop more advanced missile capabilities to shoot their missiles further and further out. That cannot be underestimated. That whole nation is under the rule of a zealot that does not care for his people and only cares about himself and his cult of personality, the Juche ideology. The Juche ideology basically puts the ruler as the head, basically as a god, and the whole family as gods. It's just messed up what's going on in North Korea and all that. I wish that that's the war that should have been fought, honestly, if we were going to go to war for something just. But the war in Ukraine is justified to an extent because Russia attacked Ukrainian territory and the like, but it doesn't mean that it needs to continue on forever to where there's loss of human life nearly every day. I mean, the reason why there needs to be peace in Ukraine is quite simple. Russia is a nuclear-armed nation-state. They may not use their nuclear weapons normally, but if they're provoked, they could. And that's why we remember the Bay of Pigs invasion of 1962, I believe, where the U.S. was having a naval blockade of Cuba, and the Russians were transporting nuclear-armed missiles to Cuba. Had that escalated, we would have been in World War III then. People back then understood the risk of nuclear weapons and understood that these things were not to be taken lightly. Unfortunately, we live in a time where we're distracted by many things and where we can't focus on really what's going on, which I believe is by design, to keep us from seeing what's really going on overseas. And the Iraq War, that war should have not have been fought, but we did anyway, didn't we, because of the people in power. In this movie itself, they talk a lot about the H-bomb program and how Oppenheimer tried to stop it. And Oppenheimer was unsuccessful, and it still got developed, because Oppenheimer feared what would happen was a nuclear arms race, which is ultimately what we got throughout the entire Cold War, and arguably this new Cold War, which we're now entering because our leaders can't put two and two together and make peace, because the greedy politicians in office want this war to continue to their benefit. One may argue that the president may have interests in Ukraine itself. We are unsure at this time if these claims of money laundering in Ukraine are legitimate, but if they indeed are, then that's obvious who's gaining from this and who's losing. The rich are gaining while the poor aren't, and the poor are only losing their lives and their money in this pointless conflict overseas in Ukraine. If anything, Opennheimer has reignited my passion for peace in Ukraine. I think that's something that we should all be pushing towards, because many people would like this war to end and for life to go back to normal over there. My heart goes out to the Ukrainians and this war that they're dealing with. But eventually all wars must reach their conclusion. Peace is sometimes better than not having peace. Even the United States had to negotiate peace when it came to Vietnam. And that was a hard thing to swallow, but we did it anyway. In our own history, we had to declare peace in the Korean War, because if we hadn't, the war would have continued on for who knows how long. And I'm not talking the kind of peace like World War I peace where the Germans and everybody else, where the Germans were humiliated at the Treaty of Versailles. That kind of peace is not the peace I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of peace where people are respectful of each other's interests, and they reach a negotiation table and they actually negotiate and hash things out. All I can hope for is that there's peace in Ukraine and that there isn't another nuclear arms race and we're not in World War III by this time next year. Even earlier. I hope I'm wrong, but I appreciate all those that watch this killer film review. We'll be diving into The Man in the High Castle next, which is about an alternate history of World War II. It's based on a book that was written, so that'll be the next one. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day.